In May of 2019, the world experienced something it was sure would never happen again. A living and breathing Union Pacific big boy locomotive. The event brought thousands of people to the windswept plains of Wyoming as UP 4014 ran under its own power for the first time in nearly 60 years. The restoration was just in time for the 150th anniversary of the driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory, Utah, commemorating the completion of the first Transcontinental Railroad. Paired with UP 844, the only steam locomotive never to be taken out of active service on a major railroad, the 4014 made its first excursion run between Cheyenne, Wyoming and Ogden, Utah in what was billed as the Great Race to Ogden. Who would have thought that in the 21st century, one could again see a 4884 pounding the rails? Seven Idea Productions takes you trackside for this historic event from Cheyenne to Ogden and return. Catch the 4014 climbing Sherman Hill, gliding across the Wyoming plains, and tackling the Wasatch grade. In Ogden, Utah, Union Pacific's Spike 150 celebration had the feeling of a rock concert as tens of thousands came to see the big boy for the very first time. We'll take you to Promontory for a reenactment of the driving of the Golden Spike that united a nation east to west.
Yeah.
And finally, the return trip, as Big Boy number 4014 and the 844 head home to Cheyenne. This is your front row seat to the greatest railroading event in over 50 years. This is Return of the Big Boy. The inaugural run of the 4014 covered nearly 500 miles between Cheyenne, Wyoming and Ogden, Utah, the traditional stomping ground for big boy locomotives when they operated in the 1940s and 50s. Saturday, May 4th marked the first day of the Great Race to Ogden and encompassed the entire length of the Laramie sub between Cheyenne and Rawlins, with the train taking Main 3 over Sherman Hill. Sunday, May 5th saw the big boy run between Rawlins and Rock Springs. The normal scheduled departure time for the steam special was 8 a.m. However, on Monday, May 6th, the 4014 had a 4 a.m. departure out of Rock Springs due to work windows on the track. The timing was perfect for photographers who were able to catch a fantastic sunrise scene as the train approached Granger just after 6 a.m. By mid-morning, the 4014 and 844 were in the siding at Evanston. On Wednesday, May 8th, after laying over for 2 days, the big boy tackled the Wasatch Mountains and glided through Echo and Weber Canyons before arriving at Ogden for the Spike 150 celebration. In addition to the festivities surrounding Ogden's Union Station, the reenactment of the driving of the Golden Spike was held at Promontory, Utah, a section of now abandoned right-of-way 50 miles northwest of Ogden and the Great Salt Lake. On Sunday, May 12th, the 4014 and 844 began the return trip to Cheyenne, over much of the same route, arriving at Evanston, then Rock Springs the following day. After a 2-day layover, it was back to Rawlins on the 16th, Laramie on the 17th, a final layover on Saturday the 18th, and then back over Sherman Hill to Cheyenne on the 19th. It was said this could never happen. Bringing the largest, most powerful steam locomotive on Earth back to life was too great a job to tackle. but the Union Pacific steam crew took it on and got it done in the nick of time. Based in Cheyenne, Wyoming, the Union Pacific Steam program is a unique operation. By the late 1950s, most Class I railroads had dropped steam in favor of more efficient diesels. Union Pacific also made the transition, yet they never did completely away with the older technology. Case in point, UP 844. This FEF3 Class 484 Northern was the last steam locomotive delivered to the UP in 1944. It was used in passenger service until 1956 and pulled freights for another 3 years. It was saved from the scrapper's torch in 1960. Rather than being retired, 844 was held for special service and has run hundreds of thousands of miles in the following decades, pulling excursion trains like this one in the Feather River Canyon in 2009. Besides the 844, UP volunteers have returned a 4664 Challenger-type locomotive, the 3985, to operating condition in 1981. Challengers were articulated steam locomotives with 2 sets of driving wheels under one massive boiler. The Big Boy is basically an enlarged version of this design. The 3985 ran until mechanical problems took it out of service in 2010. In 2013, the railfan community received news that at first was hard to believe. Union Pacific intended to reacquire a Big Boy locomotive and return it to operating condition. Of the 25 Big Boy locomotives built, 8 were saved from being scrapped and are on display around the country. UP 4014 enjoyed retirement in Pomona, California, and was deemed by the Union Pacific Steam Program as best suited for restoration. It was reacquired by the UP in 2013, and in the spring of 2014 made its journey back to Cheyenne for the restoration process. The 4014 was an instant sensation with the public, drawing large crowds wherever it stopped. For most people trackside, it was their first encounter with a Big Boy. The special train was powered by 2 EMD SD70M diesels. UP 4014 led the consist, and UP 4884 provided additional power behind Big Boy's tender. The 2 big road engines paled in comparison to the massive bulk of the steam giant in tow. This scene was shot on May 6, 2014. Nearly 5 years later, on April 10, 2019, the diesel 4014 was renumbered to UP 4479. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, Big Boy 4014 was again listed on the Union Pacific locomotive roster. In the days before Big Boy's break-in excursion to Ogden, Utah, in the spring of 2019, spring itself appeared to be reluctant to return to the high plains of southeast Wyoming. A nearly constant parade of trains kick up the snow, while racing across the legendary overland route that one time was just a wagon trail. Cheyenne sits at an elevation of 6,062 feet above sea level. The iconic Cheyenne Depot Museum retains the glory of its days as a UP train depot, a throwback to the golden age of railroading when America traveled by train. Behind the depot is UP's Cheyenne Yard, where cars are switched and trains change crews on their runs to and from Nebraska, Colorado, and throughout the West. This is also where you'll find the Union Pacific Steam Shop, and for the past 5 years, it has held the world's attention as the 4014 was made ready. On Thursday, May 2nd, the 4014 made history as it left Cheyenne under its own power for the first time in 60 years. Just 2 days before the start of the Great Race to Ogden, the steam crew performed a shakedown run through Spear, Wyoming, and into Colorado on the Greeley subdivision. At Spear, the crew assess a leaky steam cylinder and make other adjustments before continuing south after nightfall. On Saturday, May 4th, 2019, crowds gathered trackside in anticipation of the 4014's departure. The last time a big boy ran under steam, railfan videos were made on film, as this eager fan demonstrates with his Super 8 movie camera. Through the 1940s and 50s, many classic photographs were made of big boys working between Cheyenne and Ogden. For those of us who were present on this particular morning, it was hard to believe that we were actually watching a 4884 passing under the classic CNS bridge. The Great Race to Ogden had officially begun. In addition to the 844, SD70 Ace number 8937 was part of the locomotive consist to aid with the big boys break-in period. The cars on the first run consisted of the Art Lockman tool car, the Howard Fogg utility car, Lynn Nystrom, the 207, Willie James, Omaha, City of San Francisco Dome car, the Overland, and Idaho inspection car, bringing up the rear of this historic train. The westbound move of 4014 took it over Main 3, bypassing the old summit on Sherman Hill. A small crowd gathers at Perkins to watch the steam special work through the deep cuts and fills, which eased the grade to Dale Junction. West of Laramie, a photo line has formed along Howell Road to catch the big boy crossing the Laramie River. Some local ranchers have made a photo line of their own in the back of a pickup truck to greet the 4014. The first day of the Great Race to Ogden saw the steam special working over the entire Laramie subdivision between Cheyenne and Rawlins. The 4014 crosses the North Platte River at Fort Steele. At this point, 844 and the diesel are doing most of the work as the steam crew carefully breaks in the newly restored locomotive. On Sunday, May 5th, after spending the night at Rawlins, the 4014 continues its journey through Wyoming's Great Divide Basin. The steam special has just crossed the Continental Divide near Creston, and will cross it again in 25 miles. For now, It is an easy descent to the town of Wahsatch. Continuing west, the 4014 rounds a curve as it approaches Red Desert, near milepost 732. The ground shakes as a 1.2 million pound locomotive passes, and its deep-throated whistle reverberates down to the soul. The double-track main line between Cheyenne and Ogden sees an average of around 40 trains in a 24-hour period. An eastbound manifest heads through the rugged landscape just east of Point of Rocks on Main 2. The 4014 is approaching on Main 1. Wyoming is known for its wind, and dust filters through the scene as the steam special passes milepost 774. Track speed through Point of Rocks is 70 for freight and 79 for passengers. The steam crew maintain a speed of roughly 35 miles per hour for the newly rebuilt locomotive. West of Point of Rocks, Big Boy passes beneath an angry sky as it crosses Bitter Creek near Thayer. The train will soon tie up at Rock Springs, just east of Green River, Wyoming. The morning of the third day started early with a 4 a.m. departure out of Rock Springs. At Green River, a westbound stack train departs in the pre-dawn dark after a crew change. This marks the western end of the Rawlins sub and the beginning of the Evanston sub, which continues to Ogden, Utah. Green River was no stranger to big boy locomotives and once boasted a turntable designed to handle the steam giants. Cheyenne's turntable was built for challengers and was just big enough for a big boy to squeeze on. While modern diesel locomotives are serviced on a nearby track, history is being made. For the first time since the 1950s, a living and breathing big boy calls on Green River for a crew change. The temperature is in the low 30s as the giant 4884 comes to a stop near the Classic Depot. The light of dawn draws the outlines of surrounding mountains as 4014 and 844 continued their morning run to Evanston. The previous 2 days of running has proved the 4014 is breaking in nicely, so the decision is made to let it work a little harder. Instead of aiding the steam engines, the diesel is set to heavy dynamics, or brake 8, to give Big Boy a little something more to pull against. With a modern EMD SD70 ACE weighing in at over 400,000 pounds, rated at 4,500 horsepower, and able to apply 106,000 pounds of braking effort to the rail, the 4014 picked up speed, even while climbing grades, like the diesel wasn't even there. As one member of the UP steam crew put it, that Big Boy is a powerful locomotive. Just before sunrise, Big Boy 4014 announces its arrival to Granger with a giant plume of steam in the still morning air. It's no wonder so many songs and poems were written about the steam locomotive. For many photographers on hand this morning, this scene alone was worth the entire trip. Continuing west, the 4014 makes an unscheduled whistle stop at Carter, milepost 875.4. Snow fences and sage-covered hillsides set the stage for the 4014 at Leroy, as the special heads for Evanston. In 2014, the entire community of Evanston turned out to welcome the 4014 on its road to restoration. 5 years later, they gather again to see it return under steam. Set up next to the siding gives us an up-close and personal view of Big Boy's running gear. UP 844 also deserves some screen time. Although people have come to see the 4014, the FEF 3 Class Northern with its 80-inch drivers is something to behold. Where Big Boy was built for power, 844 was built for speed and passenger service. And those big driving wheels don't have to turn over too many times to cover a mile. Engine and tender weigh in at 454 tons. So it isn't exactly a light engine, even if it seems light on its feet. With the 4014 safely in the siding at Evanston, engineer Ed Dickens complies with a lockout-tagout safety procedure. Keys identifying each member of the steam crew are attached to the blue safety flag while maintenance is being done on the locomotives. Equipment cannot be coupled to or moved until the safety flag is removed, and it cannot be removed until each employee has retrieved his key. With everything in place, routine maintenance begins on the 4014 and 844. Standing next to a Big Boy, one can really appreciate its size. Engine and tender measure 132 feet, 9 7/8 inches from coupler to coupler. Total weight is 1.2 million pounds. Without its tender, the Big Boy weighs a hefty 762,000 pounds. Like the other 24 Big Boys, the 4014 burned coal, but was successfully converted to number 5 oil, like the 844 and 3985. To help meet the deadline for the 150 celebration at Ogden, the 4014 actually used 3985's tender, since it was already set up for oil. It also had the benefit of a greater water capacity than 4014's tender. The name Big Boy with a Victory V has been chalked onto the smokebox, just like what was scrawled onto the original 4000 by an unknown worker at Alco in 1941. Originally, the UP was going to call it the Wasatch type, but Big Boy stuck, and a legend was born. It's a cold and wet morning as the 4014 prepares to depart Evanston. Today is the final leg of the westbound journey to Ogden, and 2 flags have been added to the pilot: Old Glory and the Utah State flag. Today, the 4014 tackles the Wasatch Mountains, the very grade it was made for. A hardy group of photographers brave the elements and catch a piece of history. The return of the big boy to the summit at Wasatch. A clear signal beckons a 4014 over the cold, rainy Wasatch Mountains of northern Utah and into the upper reaches of Echo Canyon. Deep within the canyon, just east of the station at Echo, the Steam Special glides down the gentle grade that parallels both Highway 30 and nearby 80. As a result, traffic was backed up for an estimated 6 miles, a testament to Big Boy's popularity, even with the general public. Ogden, Utah was the western end of Big Boy territory, and during the 150 celebration, it was the central hub of all activity. City streets in the vicinity of Union Station were shut down to handle the large crowds and festivities. While the cause for the celebration was the 150th anniversary of the driving of the Golden Spike at Promontory, the Big Boy was hands down the star of the show.
UP 4014 is ready to proceed. Chairman Fritz, over.
UP Chairman Lance Fritz calls engineer and steam program manager Ed Dickens on the radio, and the 4014 makes its debut for the enthusiastic crowd.
Union Pacific 4014, take them ahead. Over. Understood. Here we come. Union Pacific coming ahead. Here we come, sir.
For 3 days, the 4014 and 844 remained at Ogden for the Spike 150 celebration. During that time, thousands of people filtered through Union Station and the many exhibits on display. On a nearby track is the consist for the return trip to Cheyenne. Just about an hour's drive north of Ogden, rough cuts and fills tell the story of an old railroad grade that once penetrated the remote countryside and changed the history of America and the world forever. These faint scars are remnants of the first Transcontinental Railroad, which was completed here at Promontory, Utah on May 10, 1869. 150 years later, the site is designated as a national park, and we are in time for a reenactment of that historic event. The Union Pacific was represented by Engine 119, while Central Pacific, building east from Sacramento, had the Jupiter. These classic 440 steam locomotives are replicas of the originals and look sharp. Weighing in at only 60 tons apiece, they are considerably smaller than either the Big Boy or the 844. But at this moment in history, they were state-of-the-art. The reenactment is a class act and a fun way to learn a piece of history.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the officials of both railroads, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific, I bid you welcome.
May God continue the unity of our country as this railroad unites the two great oceans of the world.
From Promontory to the country, bulletin, D-O-N-E, done.
With the ceremonies over, the 4014 waits patiently in the pre-dawn dark to begin its eastward return trip to Cheyenne. Dawn breaks cool and clear over Mount Ogden, the prominent feature high above the lush valley near Mountain Green. Day one of the return trip would see the steam special heading for Evanston, sporting a new 12-car consist, including the Experience the Union Pacific railcar. Big Boy heads east through Peterson. A crowd of rail fans have gathered at one of the popular photo spots in Upper Echo Canyon, Castle Rock. In 2014, we watched the Big Boy being towed from this same spot. Now, under its own power, the 4014 once again can tackle the very grade it was made for. Returning to Evanston, Wyoming, an enthusiastic crowd is again on hand to greet the new superstar of the Union Pacific Fleet. Engineer Ed Dickens takes time to sign autographs and talk with fans. The city of Evanston was founded during the building of the first Transcontinental Railroad in 1868. The present-day roundhouse and turntable were constructed in 1912, and today belong to the city of Evanston, which has embarked on an extensive restoration project. Through the city's efforts, one can stand among the classic structures and reflect upon a time when big boys, 484s, and sleek passenger trains roamed the plains of Wyoming. During 4014's visit, the city of Evanston offered rides to the public on the fully functional turntable, something one doesn't get to experience too often. From our bird's eye view, we can see that many of the old roundhouse tracks are still in place. Evanston was a layover stop for the Great Race to Ogden, and while the locomotives rest in the yard, it's business as usual on the main line, and eastbound rolls through town. On Monday, May 13th at 8 a.m., UP 4014 slowly leads the steam special out of the yard and on to Main 2 as the eastbound journey to Cheyenne continues. The 4014 stops briefly at the depot before continuing east. East of Carter, the 4014 is a large black silhouette against the vast Wyoming sky. An eruption of smoke rises from the Badlands of southern Wyoming, where trona is mined and processed into soda ash. There is another process taking place above ground. Hot water is turned into drawbar horsepower and tractive effort, pulling a 12-car train over Peru Hill. At this point, the GE diesel locomotive is just along for the ride, while the 4014 has command of the train. An easy task with such a light consist. There are still places in Wyoming that appear as they were when big boys roamed the prairie. Places where the 21st century seems long in coming. Well, almost. Aside from the large communications dish in the background, this is a classic scene at Kanda, on the Rawlins subdivision just east of Green River. The steam crew is just a few miles from Rock Springs, where they will tie up and enjoy a 2-day layover. At night, the two steam engines rest in the siding at Rock Springs, basking in the streetlights of the classic western town. The excitement and crowds that greeted the train have dissipated for now, replaced with quiet solitude, except for occasional passing trains. With a population of just over 23,000, Rock Springs is the fifth largest city in Wyoming. It has a long history with the UP. Nearby coal mines provided fuel for their growing fleet of steam locomotives, which in turn fueled the growth of the town. Thursday morning, May 16th. It is just after 8 a.m., and the 4014 again resumes its eastbound run toward Cheyenne. Today's goal is Rawlins, 120 miles to the east. At Bitter Creek, milepost 756.4, the large concrete base of a water tank remains, although the tank itself no longer exists. Like the Big Boy, it is a reminder of what used to be commonplace on the ever-changing landscape. Climbing out of Wyoming's Great Divide Basin, the 4014 crests the grade at Creston, milepost 712. The double-track main line passes under Interstate 80 as the train approaches the end of the day's run at Rawlins. The steam crew should be tying up in just a few minutes, or so it seems. As the big boy pulled into the yard, two of the rear 68-inch driving wheels went on the ground. The weight of the 600-ton engine forced the rickety track out of gauge, spreading the rails underneath driver axles 2 and 3. The train was moving slowly through the yard when it happened, and the alert crew was able to stop immediately. So, how do you re-rail the world's largest steam locomotive? The weight on the rear set of driving wheels is approximately 300,000 pounds. That's more than the weight of both 440 locomotives Jupiter and 119 put together. With a local track force on hand to fix the issue with the gauge, the steam crew applied wood blocks under the drivers. UP steam crew manager Ed Dickens is seen here hammering a wood block into place behind a driver on the engineer's side. With the blocks in place, Ed signals to the engineer of the UP 2650 to back the train slowly. This is where the benefit of modern AC traction really comes into play. Gingerly, the big GE inches the 4014 backward. Drivers 2 and 3 come up, and the big boy is back on the rail. The crew carefully walk the train away from the site of the derailment and find another place to stow the mighty 4884 for the evening. In all, it took about 3 hours to re-rail the big boy, and the steam crew was able to finally tie up with a job well done. The next day, the 4014 is again on the move. After departing Rawlins, it passes the large refinery at Sinclair, one of 2 refineries owned by the famous oil company with the big green dinosaur for a logo. A group of photographers braved the Wyoming winds on a rocky outcropping east of Rock River, near milepost 600 on the Laramie sub. In the distance, the UP 4014 can be seen approaching with an escort of pacing traffic on Highway 30. A few minutes later, the big 4884 stomps through the cut on its way to Laramie. Back in Laramie, the steam crew services the locomotives while a crowd looks on from a nearby park. One onlooker gets creative as he tries to get a better view over the chain link fence. The UP steam program may seem like an unnecessary expenditure in a time of high-tech diesels and increased automation. Yet it is an incredible public relations tool that not only garners positive feedback for the company, but also introduces new generations to trains. Unlike an old photograph or museum piece, this is living and breathing history that anyone can experience. On Sunday, May 19th, the 4014 and 844 made the final leg of their journey over Sherman Hill. The eastbound special climbs the grade on Main 1 to tie siding. The temperature on this spring morning is just above freezing, making for a good steam show. After passing tie siding, the other effects of cold air come into play. A thick layer of fog has settled in on Sherman Hill. The famous Hermosa Tunnel is cloaked by billions of water droplets as an eastbound stack train proceeds the steam special over the hill to Cheyenne. As 4014 approached, the fog lifted just long enough for the special to emerge on track 1. Returning to where it all began 2 weeks earlier, the 4014 approaches Cheyenne Yard as it passes under the CNS flyover. The inaugural run for the big boy was officially in the books, and the steam crew could soon have a well-deserved rest. We would like to thank the Union Pacific Railroad for making this entire event possible. Congratulations to Ed Dickens and the Union Pacific steam crew, who took on the enormous task of bringing the 4014 back to life and made it a success. We hope you've enjoyed witnessing this historic event, and we look forward to the 4014's future excursions over the UP system. Until next time, thanks for watching.